Hello, my name is Shweta, and today, with my colleagues Sai and Alex, I'm going to talk about our project Shibu, an interactive chatbot. An important component of Shibu is communication. But what is communication? Communication is not just about sending and receiving a piece of information. Communication is very vital to us humans because we are social animals. One component of communication is also a core component of one's own individual identity, that is gender. And there exists a spectrum of gender. Therefore, fostering gender biased communication results in unconscious biasness, and also these biases results in unfair, uneven, unbalanced representation of an individual by disregarding a part of their identity. Therefore, gender inclusive language is a way forward to promote healthy social and cultural life. Studies have shown that the first step towards adopting gender inclusive language is simply by bringing awareness around the topic and getting familiar with pronouns. Larger organizations with diverse workflows have started making small but measurable efforts towards instituting gender inclusive languages using seminars, workshops, videos, animations, blog posts, and more. However, these platforms are effective for abstract conceptualization and lacks in practical implementation. This underscored that there is a gap between institutionalization and practical implementation of gender inclusive language. To address this gap between the institutionalization and implementation of gender inclusive language, we present Shibu as a platform that encourages participants to have communication in third person, thus enforcing use of personal pronouns. But why personal pronouns? Studies have shown that the gender inclusive personal pronouns are part of your habitual process. Therefore, to change these habits, we present Shibu as an active playground where people are encouraged to participate and actively practice the use of pronouns. Looks very simple, right? But it's not that simple. The biggest problem with Shibu was to have a platform where people are encouraged and enforced to use personal pronouns. Therefore, we derived our inspiration from Bad News, which utilizes three channels of communication between the player wizard, wizard actor, player actors, which are all mediated by the underlying simulation. Taking the inspiration of Bad News, we devise our own system, which utilizes two communication channel between the player, visuals and NPCs, and player and editor using an interface of Discord where the editor acts as the wizard on the Discord bot and the visuals and NPCs act as the actors. Using the informations from visuals and NPC, player use those informations to communicate with editor in a third person. Another important aspect of working with Project Shibu was to deliver the concepts correctly. We need to deliver the concept implicitly because if the concept is not delivered implicitly, the participants will become being conscious on being judged on their use of language, and therefore we will not receive the correct responses. This will result in unwanted biasness in the studies and false reflections as feedback. Therefore, to avoid this, we derived our inspirations from games like Academical and Maze Journey. These games have established that narratives can actually induce implicit learning outcomes, and therefore, we devised a narrative along with the inspiration we took from Bad News to build a system, and we are calling it Shibu, the interactive platform. And we are using Discord as an interface to execute the entire prototype. But why are we using Discord? We are using Discord because it's a popular communication platform. Along with text, it facilitates users with emoji, GIFs, and more. Thus, it allows the facility that player can actually express what they understood about the narrative, not just in the form of text, but also as emojis, GIFs, and more. Also, the development platform is relatively easy to handle, and building a bot was quick and easy to test our prototype system. How did we use our narrative on this interface, and how did we did the player testings? I leave it to you in the hands of Sai so that he can take over about the narratives and further. Thank you.
Hi, in this section we're going to discuss about the narrative. The narrative is broken down into chapters and each chapter is broken down into scenes. The objective of breaking down the whole narrative into chapters and scenes is that we can add more chapters and make the game more scalable and test different, conduct different tests based on different scenarios. Each of these chapters is further broken down into modular scenes. The scenes are broken in such a way that they can be, reshuffled or rearranged in different chapters again if required, and see how people react to it. So in this particular playtest, or in this in this study, what we did is basically we have one player who is who role plays as the journalist, and there is the editor, which we researchers take the role as, and that's who acts like a wizard, who act as a wizard, right? Ideally, both of the individuals try to role play, and then they try to discuss what's happening based on the narrative. So we tested with one narrative at this point, and we tested with one chapter which had like 8 scenes. So I'll just walk you through these scenes to make sure that you're in a position to understand what are the results and what's been happening. For the first scene starts where we try to establish the context where this player enters Discord, and then he's a new journalist at the Santa Clara Times, right? So he's asked to register his details. Basically, we're trying to collect some demographics in that process, and we sugarcoat this as we're trying to collect some details to get their employment forms running. Then there is a bank robbery at the Santa Clara Bank, and the editor, who is the boss of the Santa Clara Times, wants somebody to cover this robbery, and he has no one, so he's forced to send this new journalist to cover such an important incident in the town, right? So this journalist reaches there, and he's given some visuals, some art, which you will see in the subsequent slides, and the narrative progresses that this hostage is being taken, and the editor is constantly pushing the journalist to report what's happening, and to keep him updated. So then what happens is eventually there's somebody who's encircling the building like a superhero. Then they land on the top of the building, and the editor is constantly questioning the journalist, like, hey, what are you seeing? And he's asking for specifics, right? Then we try to introduce some in-game stuff like, hey, check out a binoculars in the right side of your bag to zoom in and look. So we try to add some interactive elements there. And then there's a fight which breaks out between the superhuman and the thugs, and then we ask them to report about it, and then finally the day is saved. So this is how the narrative is structured for this study. Now, a subsequent next season or the next chapter could be where we're trying to trace down the superhuman, get his personal story, or we get his diary, and we're trying to understand his life. So we can really move this in different direction, or it could be a different he's saving a day in some different other context, right? So that's how the narrative is structured. Followed by that, so each of these scenes you see on the screen right now have art. So basically there's a corresponding visual to it where the journalists are actually seeing it and then kind of describe. So I'll quickly walk you through these visuals so that there's a better understanding of what's happening. Right, for example, here you see that the Santa Clara Bank is being broken down, and there's police. So here the journalist is expected to say that, oh, okay, I see a bank which is broken, and then the police cars and this CNN out there, and people are chaotic. So that's the expectation. Then they have somebody who's trying to encircle. We have somebody who's encircling the building, and they need to understand. The player needs to observe that, oh, okay, there's a hostage situation, there's explosions happening, and somebody's trying to move around the building. Then there's the superhero which has landed on this the building, and he's not really sure who this is, and the player is trying to explore who this superhero is, right? And then then we say that, oh, why don't you zoom in through your binoculars? And then we put this visual out, and then they're trying to comprehend the superhuman a little more, saying that, oh, okay, he's wearing some heels, some tights, he has nail polish on, and he has a pride flag as his cape. Then we further go into the fight of the climax of this narrative where people are fighting, and then there's this hostage, and we're trying to reveal the superhero, and then we're trying to reveal their powers, and you can see the laser going through and happening, and eventually there's this final thunderbolt scene where it's like super powerful scene. And each of this time the journalist is constantly telling, oh, the superhero is doing this, or he or she is doing this, and then we're looking at patterns, how they're using their pronouns, and we try to give an analysis at the end. So eventually, what happens is we ask them to get an interview, but they can't because the superhuman flies away, and that would be the end of the chapter here. But then eventually, how does this all get work? Is that we have this little architecture where everything runs through Discord, and there's a Django API, there's a Django interface. There's a Django backend which kind of interfaces the data from Discord and puts it in the database. So if you look at here, technically you have two major APIs, which is create player. As soon as the player enters the Discord channel, the journalist enters the Discord channel, we register him in the backend, and then eventually as they type in the Discord bot, we kind of take that data, run our NLP modules every time they send the data, and then we store that. So that's how this part of it is structured.
Okay, so now I will pick up where Sai left off with the architecture and move into the natural language processing pipeline that we created. So we use the Spacey natural language processing library. Spacey is really great because it's fast. It can run on a CPU. Um, it offers a number of sized language models. So originally we were using a large language model, which is a higher accuracy than what we realized we need to do in order to host the system on a free tier Heroku machine, was reduce the size of the language model to the smallest web tier. And I think it's like just under the threshold of what we can run on our server. It's probably been designed that way to work with Heroku. Um, so we use a small language model, and what that does is it tokenizes each word and splits sentences into sentences within a discourse act into multiple individual parse trees. And these parse trees are constituency parses, meaning that you start with your sentence, and that is broken up into noun phrases and verb phrases, and lower level individual parts of speech, I should say. So this is a little bit of code we wrote for that. Essentially, you can see we use Spacey to parse the text. Then we use this custom extract pronouns function to pull out the gendered and genderless set of pronouns that um, were used in that utterance, that piece of text written by the player. And then we do a little bit of extra processing and we feed that back to the server. This is that extract pronouns function, so pretty straightforward. At the end of the day, we probably could have used a simpler library than doing a full constituency parse over the text, but this was pretty straightforward, and it gives us our gendered and genderless words from our list. From our list of gendered and genderless pronouns that we predefined. So here is a screenshot of the system, and I will go ahead and show it off right now. So I'm just going to reuse this. Actually, no, I'll say something else. So this is the Discord app, and you can see here some example playtests, and we just had the back and forth. And so whenever a phrase is written here, like let's say, how about Shibu went to the store and they were called to save the day once again. So that then hits the back end, and you can see here we have the list of all of the responses that the player has uttered, not the editor. And for each of these responses, we get the gendered and the neutral pronouns. We do this we just count the number of words, and we also do this named entity recognition. So here you can see Spacey actually incorrectly identified Shibu as a geopolitical entity, which is a little bit off the money. But in any case, you can see this is where um, our analysis comes from. And this we just used at the end of the playtesting more than anything. So back to the presentation. Here are some snippets from some of our playtests. So this is early in the narrative. You can see this playtester is just coming up to terms with interacting with the images that we provide. And this is one of the moments that we provide many objects in the artwork in order to kind of allow the player to pick up on many different aspects of the narrative. And if they don't, if for instance they just say there's an emergency and they neglect the fact that they're police officers and media, we can subtly prompt them to be more uh, elaborate in their explanations, which will help later when we start to solicit gender-based language use. So we just want to make sure that there's enough text to analyze, essentially. So this is the initial pronoun usage of player two. So you can see that they initially were unsure if Shibu was a man or a woman, defaults to he as the original pronoun use, and then immediately kind of realizes um, that that might not be correct. Um, and so, yeah, each of the players kind of had a different initial pronoun use. This one begins with a person and then again defaults to he. It continues to use he for the rest of the playtest. Um, except, sorry, actually does switch to he, she at some point. Um, you can see here that at the end of the playtest, we do provide feedback based off of what we see in the back end. Um, and we told player three that they had 10 pronoun violations throughout the gameplay, including the final article that they wrote about. So they played as a journalist, and we asked them to write an article about the entire narrative. And so that factors into our final analysis. And you can see player five here did not actually make any pronoun violations, so they were very good. And we let them know that. So there's probably a lot more to do here. One of the things we want to do in the back end is uh, use entity-based coreference resolution to associate the pronouns that are used with the noun or proper noun, potentially, the entity that those pronouns are in reference to. So that would allow us to automatically determine if he or she was referencing Shibu or one of the other characters, right? There's a villain, there's a cop, there's the editor that you're talking to. At any point, a pronoun might be referring to one of these other characters, and so we will be using a capable coreference technology that's able to resolve genderless as well as gendered pronouns. So there's a paper that we read about this. And we will build that into the next version of the system. The next thing that we want to do is move from this Wizard of Oz model to a fully automated um, discourse act bucketing model, similar to what Facade does. So you're able to kind of get a gist of what the player is saying and then feed the appropriate narrative response to them based off of what they typed. We were hoping to get that off the ground in this version, and there's just kind of too much there, so we ended up refocusing on the Wizard of Oz um, prototype. And the fully automated system would also then be taking into account the pronouns used in order to do these modifications. Um, so we want to try more narratives. So this was a really good test for us because we were able to see kind of how players typically responded and where our narrative broke down or what we weren't planning on. Um, and we did change our script a bit during playtest, as we expected. And so we want to kind of try more studies, try more narratives, see what does elicit more correct use of pronouns, and continue to play with how we can reinforce that in the players. Um, and finally, we want to make that feedback that we wrote based off of the analysis of the backend. We want to make that pronoun feedback automatic. So that is going to be a major work of um, for us in the future.